All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Yes, I'm back to wearing a t-shirt with a blazer. It is largely to drive Anna crazy. Okay, there's a new shirt. You can pre-order it right now on shoptyt.com. I'd like to thank you. And at the bottom, it says Homo Progressives. Okay, there you go. Go nuts right now, shoptyt.com. Okay, so now, big show ahead for you guys. I'm in an angry mood, so that's fun.
Oh, that makes the both of us. It should be an explosive show.
Okay, yeah, well, brace for impact. So we're gonna talk about the Green New Deal in a little bit. I think the Democrats are also wrong on it. Republicans are obviously wrong on it. So we'll get to that. We'll get to a lot of the policy issues that are up for discussion now. We're gonna start with insurance in a second. And then more anger at both the Republicans and the Democrats because a Republican congressman does something deeply anti-Semitic and not a peep from Democratic leadership. Not an effing peep. So when it comes to attacking their own, they're lions. When it comes to criticizing Republicans, they're lambs. They wonder why we think they don't support us. They're not our leaders. They're the leaders of the, in fact, they're not even the leaders of the donors. They're the followers of the donors. They're quite pathetic. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the rage.
It's become clear that the Trump administration is pushing for federal judges to strike down all of the Affordable Care Act, including several of its popular protections, like protections for those who have pre-existing conditions. Now, Trump was asked about this, and here is his answer.
The administration is making very clear that you think the Affordable Care Act is invalid and should be struck down. What is your message to Americans?
Let me just tell you exactly what my message is. The Republican Party will soon be known as the party of healthcare. You watch.
Okay, this is the same guy who said that people who lie should be banned from television. So that is, they will be known as the party who destroyed healthcare, and it is not an arguable position. So if you see a so-called debate on cable news, they are lying to you on purpose. They are being politically correct. They're not giving you the facts. The facts are the Trump administration has filed papers in court to completely get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Anna's gonna give you all the details, but I'll give the highlights right now. 21 million people would lose their insurance. Over 50 million people could lose their insurance because of pre-existing conditions. It's over 100 million people that would be affected by pre-existing conditions, but according to reports, over 50 million would lose their insurance because of pre-existing conditions. And then you have another 109 million people who would be affected by the lifetime and yearly caps. So hey, if your healthcare problem was really bad, like one that might kill you, and you ran into a cap, well, sad day for you. You have no more money, we're not gonna give it to you, and you're gonna bankrupt your entire family and then proceed to die, because that's the GOP plan. That's a fact. And there's Mitch McConnell right next to him, and all the Republican leaders, none of them are objecting to what the Trump administration is doing. I'm telling you right now, if you hear any journalists out there saying that, hey, we can't tell which one's that better healthcare plan, which one would cover more people or not, they are lying on behalf of the Republican Party because of political correctness. Tell the truth.
So the lies continue on social media as well, where Trump had tweeted, the Republican Party will become the party of healthcare. Now I'm gonna give you all the reasons why that is untrue. First off, while they've been clear in their position on the Affordable Care Act, they have not proposed any policy that would take the Affordable Care Act's place. They are mentioning block grants, but there is no policy. And there are a number of protections here with the Affordable Care Act that are important, that have not been addressed by the GOP. So for instance, let's start with the pre-existing conditions and how much of an impact repealing or getting rid of the Affordable Care Act would have. Currently, as many as 133 million Americans, roughly half of the population under the age of 65, have pre-existing medical conditions that could disqualify them from buying a health insurance policy or cause them to pay significantly higher premiums if the health law were overturned. But if you want to get to serious pre-existing conditions, the Kaiser Family Foundation estimated that 52 million people have conditions serious enough that insurers would outright deny them coverage if the ACA were not in effect. Its estimates are based on guidelines insurers had in place about whom to cover before the federal law was enacted. So these were guidelines and policies that insurance companies already had. This was a practice that they were already doing prior to the passage of Obamacare.
Okay, so now the fact that Trump is lying about them being the party of healthcare, unless he means destruction of healthcare, is a fact, okay? And but when you turn to the Republican Party, I'm again issuing a challenge to all the so-called journalists in America. Are you gonna put every single Republican congressman on the spot? Because a lot of them in their campaign said, no, we wanna protect people with pre-existing conditions. Right now, the official policy position of the Trump administration is to deny you if you have a pre-existing condition. And by the way, they didn't change their position on that. They changed their position to be in favor of a total repeal of Affordable Care Act in the court system, right? But they had always been in favor of getting rid of protections for pre-existing conditions. So Republicans, which one is it? Are you with Donald Trump or are you for protecting people with pre-existing conditions? Because you cannot have it both ways. And if the mainstream media in this country lies on behalf of the Republican Party and calls it even, well, then they are no journalists at all. All they are is stenographers for the Republican and Democratic parties, and their job is to take the truth and twist it into lies so that, well, hey, I didn't offend Republicans, I lied on their behalf. So I'm not saying that they're doing that yet, although they have done that historically every time. New York Times has a good story about it today that lays out the facts, but they must go to the next step and say the Republicans are in favor of this policy, which would rob you of your health insurance. That's a fact. How many times do I have to say it? Oh, well, no, it's an opinion. You guys like the Democratic Party. No, I don't. I can't stand the Democratic Party. I think that their leadership is pathetic. I could go on and on, okay? I need you to report the facts. But again, largely, they will mostly, you turn on cable news, they'll have so-called debates and they will do political correctness to call it even.
So let's talk about the number of people that would be impacted as a result of this change in policy or getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. So you hear the number 20 million Americans quite a bit, and I want to break that down for you. So currently, under the Affordable Care Act, there are 11.4 million Americans who buy health insurance through these Obamacare marketplaces. 12 million receive coverage through the expansion of Medicaid. So this is federal money, federal taxpayer money that's given to states to expand their Medicare program in order to cover low-income individuals. About 21 million are most at risk if Obamacare is struck down. That includes 9.2 million who receive federal subsidies. So let's talk about those subsidies a little bit because they're incredibly important. As we know, healthcare premiums are very expensive. And so if you are a low-income individual, it's hard for you to pay for that on your own. These subsidies help make those premiums affordable. So on average, the subsidies covered $525 of a $612 monthly premium for customers in the 39 states that use the federal marketplace, healthcare.gov. And I also want to note that there were red states who refused to accept that federal money in order to offer coverage to their constituents. Red states were so defiant about this that they were willing to allow their constituents to suffer just so they could make a point about how partisan they are and how much they hated the Affordable Care Act.
And now if you're a Republican voter and you say, I don't want those bums leeching off the government, right? And I know who you're referring to and everybody knows who you're referring to. But if you're on Medicaid, I want you to know, according to your definition, not my definition, you're one of those bums. So the Medicaid is from the government. I know, well, Cenk, why are you bothering to clarify the most obvious things in the world? They don't know it. I just talked to a documentarian that talked to a MAGA guy, and he's like, get your government hands off my Medicaid. You idiot, that is the government. Oh, I hate socialism. What is Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security? That is, in essence, socialism. And by the way, again, a failure of the mainstream media. Why? Well, hey, socialism is radical and extreme. And they never clarify. They say, oh, it's obvious. It's not obvious. Do the polling. I bet you a majority of Republican voters would tell you that Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are not socialist programs, are not. I don't think that even a majority would think that they were government programs, that they were government providing support for people like themselves. No, that's not the government, no way. Government sucks. Hey, don't touch my Medicaid. Yes, if you're getting Medicaid, it's gonna get cut by the Republicans. Get it through your thick skull.
And just to give you a number on how many people would lose their Medicaid coverage, more than 12 million low-income adults who have gained Medicaid coverage through the law's expansion of the program could lose it.
And let me be clear, the great majority of those are white Americans. And a huge percentage based on demographics in the 2016 vote were Trump voters. So you idiots, we're trying to protect you so that your family, when they get sick, don't die, okay? But if you're gonna fight us on it, at least understand you're the one benefiting from the program.
And children, of course, would also be affected by this. According to the Urban Institute and their analysis, in all, enrollment in the program would drop by more than 15 million, including roughly 3 million children who got Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program when their parents signed up for coverage. And there are a bunch of other issues here that don't really get as much attention. They're smaller protections, I guess you could argue, but they do have a huge impact. So for instance, the ACA requires insurance companies to cover substance abuse treatment, and they could stop if the law were struck down. Now, as we all know, the opioid epidemic is huge, and there's been very little in the form of solutions from the Trump administration. Getting rid of the Affordable Care Act and the treatment coverage that health insurance companies are now forced to provide would further exacerbate the problem. Also, 40% of people from ages 18 to 65 with opioid addiction, roughly 800,000 people are on Medicaid, many or most of whom became eligible for it through the healthcare law.
All right, I'm not done yet. So now let me turn to that 109 million number that I gave you guys. Overall, 156 million Americans could be affected by the lifting of coverage caps. So there's yearly caps in the old days before Affordable Care Act, and there was lifetime caps. On lifetime caps alone, according to a Brookings Institute analysis done in 2017, 109 million people could be exposed to those lifetime caps again if we go to the old system, which we would if the Trump administration gets their way in court. So what's the point of health insurance? It's to treat you for sometimes mild conditions. When you do checkups, you're usually doing copays anyway, so you're paying for it. If you've got medium-sized problems, insurance kicks in, you pay a lot in deductibles, premiums, copays, etc., but you're likely gonna survive, but actually 40% of the country can't even survive a $400 bill, right? Without having to take out money in a loan, debt, etc., right? But if you get a life-threatening illness, you're a goner. You're almost certainly gonna run into the cap. And when you run into the cap, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna bankrupt your family because you gotta pay out of your own pocket. Because what are you gonna do? You're gonna let your mom die? You're gonna let your kid die? No, you're not. You're gonna spend every dollar you have, you're gonna sell your house, you're gonna sell your cars, you're gonna bankrupt yourself. It's not theoretical, it's already happened millions of times in this country. And then after that, you're gonna run out of money anyway, and that family member's gonna die. Hey, but health insurance companies gotta make profits. The private system's great, isn't it? And that's what we're gonna be exposed to again now. Who brought you that? Who is fighting for that tooth and nail, that horrible, horrific system? The Republican Party. It is not in dispute. Anyone who tells you in dispute is a liar and not a journalist. Okay, and finally, we talked about Medicaid, we talked about all the other people affected in every other way. Let's talk about Medicare. Americans love Medicare, including the Republicans. Republican voters love Medicare. They're gonna cut your Medicare. That is also part of this. When the Affordable Care Act helped Medicare recipients in two different ways, it covered more things than Medicare used to cover. and it lowered your prescription drug prices. Now, 133 million Americans, that's roughly half the population under the age of 65, are going to be affected by the pre-existing conditions. And then everyone above the age of 65 that gets Medicare is going to be affected by the factors that I just outlined for you guys. So your prices are gonna go up if you get Medicare. Who's gonna do that? Whose fault is that? 100% the Republican Party. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not a journalist, they're a liar. You know, I used to think, last thing on this, guys. People would ask me, are you guys journalists? And I would laugh in the beginning. You know, we've been doing the show for a long time. And I'd say, of course not, we're talk show hosts. And now my answer is a resounding yes, but only vis-a-vis the other so-called journalists in this country. Because I had assumed naively when we started 17 years ago that journalists were fair and they would, they aggressively pursued the facts and told the facts no matter what. No, they don't. No, what I've seen is, hey, here's the Democrats say this, the Republicans say this, truth says this, lies say that, but I'm not gonna tell you which one is truth and lies. I'm gonna cover it up. So there are some great journalists in the country. Again, in this case, New York Times, I'll give their names, Reed Abelson, Abby Goodenow, and Robert Pear that did this in-depth analysis. Great journalism, thank you, that's facts. Now they don't blame the Republican Party, but they should. That is what the Republican Party is fighting for, is to rob you of all these things, but that's okay. They gave you good facts. They're, in that sense, better journalists than us, no question. But if you see journalists giving you false equivalency, they're not journalists. And yes, we are infinitely better than them at this.
Let's talk a little bit about Bernie Sanders and his unapologetic attitude toward critics on Medicare for All. So, a common line of attack toward Bernie Sanders in his pushing for Medicare for All is that his plan would do away with private insurers. And even though that's an attack, here is how Bernie Sanders handles that very criticism.
We have to recognize that the current system is incredibly dysfunctional and wasteful. Its goal is to make profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. You are not going to be able in the long run to have cost-effective universal health care unless you change the system, unless you get rid of the insurance companies, unless you stand up to the greed of the drug companies.
Now, that video clip on MSNBC with Chris Hayes was tweeted by the RNC, and the RNC attacked Bernie Sanders for that, writing, "Bernie Sanders on limiting private health insurance, get rid of the insurance companies." And Bernie Sanders retweeted it and added the comment, "You're damn right."
God, that's why we love him. You wonder why we love him. That's why. Okay, so that goes to two things, guys. One, who is the champion of these policies? Who's the champion? So look, there are other progressives that I like in the race, and I got no issues with them and no disrespect, but who's the champion? He's been championing that for decade after decade. You know why I say that? Because it's a fact. He's not my uncle. I don't know him from Adam, okay? All I know is here's this guy who is a rock and who's been fighting for this all along. So he's been right on the issues. He's been the ones fighting for those issues, which leads to point number two. When someone is in office, who do you think is going to act on these issues? Someone who joined the party late, someone who's kind of in favor of it, who's in favor of Medicare for some or Medicare for all eventually, or a guy who writes, damn right we're gonna get rid of private insurance and we're gonna get you Medicare for all. Medicare polls not Medicare for all, Medicare itself polls a 77%. Medicare for all polls a 70%. Now Democratic leadership is bragging that the Affordable Care Act is now up to 50%. Great, I think the Affordable Care Act is infinitely better than what we had before. Is it as good as Medicare for all?
No.
Clearly not. It does not cover nearly as many things. It has, Medicare for all has no premiums, deductibles, copays, I can go on and on. So, but the Democrats go, oh wow, I mean, Medicare for all might poll at 70%, but that number's gonna go down, that number's gonna go down. Well, you don't say that about Affordable Care Act. You don't say, oh, it's at 50%, but it's gonna go down. You go, yes, it's at 50%. So why don't you celebrate that Medicare for all is at 70%? Because you don't actually want it. I don't want a president who's gonna lie to us and then not do a goddamn thing. I want a president who comes in on day one and who says Medicare for all, you're damn right we're going for it and we're gonna get it.
So I wanna elaborate a little more on the point that you made about how Bernie Sanders has been fighting for the same thing for decades, right? He's not some latecomer to the progressive movement. He was talking about and pushing forward progressive policies from day one, even when these policies were not popular, even when progressivism wasn't considered trendy in the Democratic Party. And so I think that that speaks volumes to who he is as a politician. I feel like progressivism today is to politics what skinny jeans is to fashion, right? It's trendy, so politicians, I see a lot of politicians throwing that word around as if it's something that they've always believed in. I just see a lot of fraudulent behavior going on, and I ask that everybody pay close attention to voting records, pay close attention to speeches that have been given by these politicians throughout the decades, if they've been politicians throughout the decades. What have they stood for? Have they been strong? More importantly, have they been leaders? Because I would argue that it's incredibly easy to be a leader when you're fighting for something that's already very popular. A real leader pushes the country in the right direction when it's uncomfortable and difficult to do so. And that's what Bernie Sanders has done over and over again.
Now people come on and go, oh yeah, sure, I'm for Medicare for all. I mean, it's overwhelmingly popular, so I'm in favor of it. I mean, eventually. No, hell to the no. Not eventually, day one. We're not stuttering. Now, so let me address the so-called journalists in Washington who are deeply biased against progressives and Bernie Sanders. So first of all, they'll sometimes say things like, well, since he's won on all these issues and the other candidates have adopted them, we don't need him anymore. What the hell kind of sense does that make? Since George Washington already won the Revolutionary War and everybody is now an American, we don't need him anymore, so he shouldn't run for president. What? Well, what are you? Why wouldn't the leader run? Why wouldn't the guy who championed it run and be the obvious one you should support? No, it can't be Bernie. Why? Because he would actually do it, and no one in Washington actually wants it done. Let's keep it real on that. So that's the reality of what's going on. Now, on the issue of private insurance, this is where all the Washington reporters who claim they're unbiased, oh, we're neutral, an opinion. We asked a political reporter on the show a couple of weeks ago. He said, no, I don't do assumptions, I only do facts. That's hilarious, okay? Their assumption is getting rid of private insurance, that's radical. That's right, wait a minute, isn't that an assumption? Every other developed country has a single payer and doesn't have private insurance. They might have different layers of small amount of private insurance, but largely it's single payer, the government does it. So aren't we the radical ones for being the only developed country that relies on private insurance, who maximizes their profits by not giving us healthcare, by not giving us healthcare? But somehow the radical position is to provide healthcare for everyone. But that's not a radical position. It's only radical if you're a corrupt Washington insider who wants to protect the profits of health insurance executives. So is it actually radical to get rid of private insurance? No, because in reality, we're not getting rid of privatized healthcare or hospitals or any of those things. So they usually leave it vague enough that it scares people, like, oh my God, are they gonna get rid of my doctor? They're gonna get rid of, no, it doesn't affect your doctor at all. Can you still go to your doctor? Absolutely, you will be covered completely. So why would you need private insurance if you're covered completely? Well, I mean, what if you had cancer? Covered. What if you got a heart attack? Covered. What if you broke your leg? Covered. What if you had any kind of disease? Covered. But what would be your copay? Zero. Premium, zero. Deductible, zero. Oh, but that'll be a lot of taxes. But that Medicare for all, even according to the Koch brothers study, saves $2 trillion. It saves $2 trillion. Why don't you be honest with the American people? You don't want Bernie Sanders because you're afraid he actually will do Medicare for all, and he will cost you some advertisers that are in the health insurance company that allow you to get fat off their money as they're getting fat off the rest of us.
When we return from the break, we are going to talk about the Senate vote on the Green New Deal and what Democrats did in order to, in their minds, avoid a tricky maneuver by Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, it's so cute, so goddamn cute. Listen, I'm gonna tell you something, okay? It says homo progressives on this shirt, okay, at the bottom. That's our slogan, Homo Progressives. And yes, in the next year and a half, or a little bit longer than that, there's gonna be a huge fight. And we're gonna be on your side. And almost no one else is. tyt.com/join. You either make us strong and powerful and we roar for you guys, or you'll have the same lukewarm, biased, completely in favor of the status quo and the establishment press that is the entirety of the rest of the media. So your call, but we can't do this alone. We don't have any private backers. We don't have any giant insurance companies backing us. All we got is you guys. tyt.com/join. Let's roar together. We hope you're enjoying this free clip from the Young Turks. If you want to get the whole show and more exclusive content while supporting independent media, become a member at tyt.com/join today. In the meantime, enjoy this free segment. All right, back on the Young Turks. A lot of people commented on what we did yesterday. No, sorry, the wrong tweets. You want to tell us a couple of things, Anna?
Yeah, I want to tell you guys about Squarespace. So Squarespace is a great place to go if you're looking to create your website. I used it to create my own website. I know Cenk has used it to create a website, which is kind of amazing for obvious reasons. All right, I won't throw you under a bus. I'll keep it easy today, I'll keep it easy. Anyway, you get a discount if you join through the TYT code. So doesn't matter if it's for personal use or for business. You go to squarespace.com/TYT and you get a 10% discount, all right? You can even buy URLs there. You don't have to go to a different business and then go to Squarespace to create your website. You can do both at Squarespace. I highly recommend you do so.
Okay, all right, let me now read a couple of your comments from the member section. Sartorial Narwhal says, unfortunately, Trump and the GOP now know that many Republicans are low information voters and only listen to the sound bites or read tweets. That's right, that's why we're desperately asking the journalists to do their job. So when Trump says 1,000 times over, we're the healthcare party, we're the party of healthcare, we're the party of healthcare. You know what, it'll work because the journalists will cower instead of doing their jobs. And so will the Democrats because that's what they do for a living. Meg writes in, the pre-existing conditioner have her here, so she has one. Some dude at my work was flipping out last night because he's a diabetic and now cannot afford his insulin. Paramedics had to come to calm him down. So that's the situation we have in this country. It's barbaric. Well, hey, if you can't afford your insulin, go ahead and suffer, and then eventually die. Okay. Alex writes in, Democratic leadership doesn't care about actual anti-Semitic comments. They just care about comments critical of Israel. Well, they have now proven that several times over, and that's a story that we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. Last one, Sawyer Progressive says, I'm a PSS for dementia home. I can't even imagine these people using their health care. The family already struggle financially and emotionally. Imagine them losing the little help that they have. The Republican Party in this country is vicious, vicious. And the Democrats fight back with and then they brag about how they're master legislators, getting their asses handed to them by these monstrous Republicans, cowering in the shadows. Let's get to that story.
Mitch McConnell pushed for a vote on the Green New Deal, even though it isn't legislation, it's a non-binding resolution. But it was a political stunt in order to get Democrats in districts that are purple to vote in favor of the Green New Deal so they have a harder time getting reelected. So the measure, of course, did not pass. It needed 60 votes to clear a procedural hurdle, and it failed in a 0 to 57 vote, with 43 Democrats voting present. So the Democrats refused to vote either in favor or against. They decided to vote present because they recognize this as a sham and as a political plot. Democratic Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Doug Jones of Alabama, and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona voted with Republicans, though, against the measure, as did Senator Angus King of Maine, and an independent who caucuses with the Democrats.
Important note here, Angus King is an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats like Bernie Sanders does. but he votes with Republicans all the time. There's no howl from the Democratic leadership or the Democratic Party about Angus King's not even a Democrat. He's not even a Democrat, and he goes and votes with the Republicans all the time. No, they love that. Like, he votes with corporations. He votes with all of our donors. Angus King, great guy, great guy. We got to support Angus King. Do you know that the Democratic Party stood by and did not support the Democratic candidate in that race last year in Maine? They supported Angus King instead, who's an independent who votes with the Republicans. But when Bernie Sanders says, hey, Democratic Party should be more progressive, they're like, not a Democrat, not a Democrat, he's an independent, he's an independent. Okay, so which one is it? God damn it, they're so obvious.
So while we see cowardice and a lack of courage from some of the Democrats, most of the Democrats in Congress right now, in the Senate and the House, luckily we do have some freshman Democrats who understand what it means to fight for values and policies that would actually lead to a better country. In fact, one of those freshman Democrats gets a lot of attention, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Enjoy the next video.
The concern of the environment as an elitist concern. 1 year ago, I was waitressing in a taco shop in downtown Manhattan. I just got health insurance for the first time a month ago. This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Tell that to the families in Flint, whose kids have their blood is ascending in lead levels. Their brains are damaged for the rest of their lives. Call them elitist. You're telling them that those kids are trying to get on a plane to Davos? People are dying. They are dying. And the response across the other side of the aisle is to introduce an amendment 5 minutes before a hearing in a markup. This is serious. This should not be a partisan issue. This is about our constituents and all of our lives. Iowa, Nebraska, broad swaths of the Midwest are drowning right now, underwater. Farms, towns that will never be recovered and never come back. And we're here and people are more concerned about helping oil companies than helping their own families? I don't think so. I don't think so. This is about our lives. This is about American lives. And it should not be partisan. Science should not be partisan. We are facing a national crisis. And if we do not ascend to that crisis, if we do not ascend to the levels in which we were threatened at the Great Depression, when we were threatened in World War II, if we do not ascend to those levels, if we tell the American public that we are more willing to invest and bail out big banks than we are willing to invest in our farmers and our urban families, then I don't know what we're here doing.
See, sorry, Anna, that's how you roar, okay? And so why have the Democrats been losing for the entire time that I've been covering politics? Because they wouldn't make speeches like that. Oh, that's not civil. Oh my gosh, she called out oil companies, but a lot of the Democratic Party members, her beloved colleagues, take oil money. Well, then don't, because that means you're selling out to them. And that's why you let the Republicans win over and over and over again. God, I loved when she talked about how she was a bartender a year ago and she just got health insurance for the first time a month ago.
She's 29.
See, that's what it's supposed to be like in America. That's what a democracy is. When you have real citizens who run for office. I've never been more proud of the Justice Democrats. They helped get Ocasio-Cortez elected and all those other fighters, and they changed the entire dynamic of Congress. So what did the other Democrats do? Look, I think
I want to show you, okay? It's one thing to talk about what the other Democrats do, but I think it's more important for you to see for yourselves. So I'd like to show you a video of Chuck Schumer just to juxtapose the way he's handling this debate as opposed to the way AOC has handled this debate. Take a look.
Already we're off to a great start. Leader McConnell's cynical stunt backfired. A New York Times editorial sums it up. Where's your plan? Where's your climate plan, Mr. McConnell? Couldn't have said it better myself. Leader McConnell, what he did is for the first time, for 5 years, he put no significant legislation on the floor about climate. For 5 years, we've had almost, when he's been in charge, no committee hearings on climate. For 5 years, we made no progress on climate. And then when he tried his stunt, it boomeranged on him, and now everyone's talking about climate. Leader McConnell, even yesterday, had to do something that he's never done. He was asked by a reporter, do you believe that climate change is real? Do you believe it's caused by human activity? And hallelujah, he answered yes to both. Now, there's the third question he hasn't yet answered, which is, should Congress take strong, immediate action?
Look, perhaps this is a difference in perspective, but I did not perceive this as something that backfired on Mitch McConnell, because the one thing that the Republican Party is very, very good at is spin and the fight. And they've showed time and time again that they can control the narrative, and they've controlled it to their advantage. So how are Republicans gonna spin this? Well, I'll give you an example from Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming. The Green New Deal is not the solution for America. It is a big green bomb that will blow a hole in our strong, healthy, and growing economy. That's exactly why Democrats aren't voting for it. That's exactly why Democrats are ducking and dodging and distancing themselves from this so-called Green New Deal. So while Democrats in the Senate would argue, well, we voted present because we didn't want to play into this McConnell strategy, in reality, even voting present allows them to spin this in a way that makes it appear that you're just dodging this, that you don't really support it and you just don't want to be on the record voting one way or the other.
I 100% agree with you. It's proceeding from weakness. We voted present. Don't vote present. Make up your mind. Okay, you know what I was gonna say. So now on the record, it lost 0 to 57. Hey, New York Times said we were good. You see all the other senators like snickering in the background. The New York Times said we did a good job. The New York Times in an op-ed, they said we did a good job, we win. No, that's not how you win. That's not how you win. You win by going to the people and saying, we're not gonna take it anymore and we're gonna fight for you. Leader McConnell was busted according to the New York Times. Come on, man. And look, they're good senators who voted to present because it was Schumer's brilliant legislative strategy to do that. It reeks of weakness. It smells of weakness, and the voters can sense it. Which voters like, oh my God, I am so psyched that my senator voted present. That'll show Leader McConnell.
Right.
No voter has ever said that in the history of America. So, and it drives them crazy when we say, why don't you do like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? And they go, what do you mean? She's just a freshman and she didn't earn anything yet. I've been here for a long time, she should wait her turn.
You know what she is? She's 29 years old. She does not have a political career, a long running political career, and she's a leader. She's a leader because she does what's uncomfortable, and she promotes policies that she knows she's gonna get attacked for, but they're policies that she knows are important in protecting the environment, in protecting the American people, in doing something about economic injustice in America. She's a leader. A leader purposely puts herself or himself in an uncomfortable position because they know it's the right thing to do. She's a leader, Schumer is not.
But how are we gonna get along with the Republicans if we have polarizing figures like this? You're not. I have a note from your base for Democratic leadership. They don't want you to get along with Republicans. They want you to beat them. I know that comes as a giant shock to you. Send the memo to Biden too. We're not interested in working with goddamn Mitch McConnell or goddamn Donald Trump. We're interested in crushing them. Send the word out.
Let's take a break. More news when we come back, including Betsy DeVos's move against the Special Olympics.